It's a very simple exercise, and a lot of film scholars before me have said it too. Choose your favorite films and watch them 3 times. Once, watch them properly. Second time, watch them with the sound off to understand the visual choices that the filmmaker made. And the third time, listen to it with the image off to understand the sound choices that the filmmaker made. If you just do this, the film making reveals itself to you like no book or no film scholar and no film school can. Just tuck, you will know why Kubrick did what he did, why Hitchcock did what he did, why anybody did what they did.
So in the film Agli Baar, I just wanted to know, why is this killer, going after people, and like they're definitely connected to each other.
अगर ये communicate नहीं हुआ ना, मैं समझाना नहीं चाहूँगा, क्योंकि बहुत सारी चीजें अगली बार में भी थोड़े एम्बिग्यूअस मैंने छोड़े हैं, जैसे ऑडियंस उन गैप्स को फिल कर सके. तो मैं तो नहीं समझाना चाहूंगा. अगर कोई और समझाना चाहे, आई एम हैप्पी टू लिसन टू दिस कन्वर्सेशन, बिकॉज़ यू कांट आंसर सच क्वेश्चंस, यू कैन जस्ट ब्रिंग योर पर्सपेक्टिव टू इट.
Bro, what I have realized watching that film is, because that guy, if you see the conversation from the start, that the girl who is afraid, she is afraid of somebody, and she's talking to the other girl, he'll kill him or they'll come. This is one of my perspective, but if you take it as a whole, she's afraid of somebody, and the same guy, or maybe community, or maybe group, or I don't know, there are other people also afraid of him or getting killed by.
So if I can, I'll add a little bit. I mean, I won't try to limit it to what my intent with the story was. But so there are many things that were happening between 2002 and 2014 when this government came to power. And I made this film in 2015, and I had called it Agli Baar for very obvious reasons. And the people who were putting it out, the film, they said कि तुम इस film को Agli Baar कहोगे तो there's going to be trouble. So I said, that's exactly why I'm calling it Agli Baar. I want that trouble. I want to have those difficult conversations. But I had to also keep in mind that it was a platform that I don't own. So I changed it to Agli Baar. Somewhere, a lot of things, when I'm saying a lot of things were happening in those years, 2002 में ये गुजरात में riots हुए थे, and it was the first time in the history of the world that the highest court of a country, in this case the Supreme Court, allowed amateur video evidence to convict people of doing things that were illegal in the riot. Now, when I say amateur video evidence, what do I mean? So there was a group called the Video Volunteers, and it didn't exist before the riots, but there were a bunch of activists and videographers and amateur filmmakers who came together and started quickly training the minority and people who were under threat into shooting. जैसे कुछ भी हुआ, shoot करते रहो. आप मर भी गए तो हमारे पास evidence होगा, क्योंकि जो लोग राइट्स में वायलेंस परपेट्रेट करते हैं ना, उनको बाद में आप कटघरे में खड़ा नहीं कर सकते हो, क्योंकि एविडेंस नहीं हो. और जो लोग जाकर विटनेस दे सकते हैं, वो डरे हुए होते हैं, तो उनका मुंह नहीं खुलता. सो people who start riots or perpetuate violence in riots get away scot-free. So a lot of this amateur video footage ended up in the Supreme Court, and it helped convict a lot of people. One of the main persons who was convicted was a gentleman called Babu Bajrangi, who actually walked free last week and is actually going to be standing for elections next year. So he had almost 65 rape and murder cases on him during the riots. And there are a couple of videos that I have witnessed with my own eyes. So that idea that the video volunteers started implementing, I found so powerful. And when I visited Adivasi areas when the development conflict was hitting its peak between 2009 and 10 and 11 in Chhattisgarh, Odisha, the video volunteer idea had sort of traveled outwards. And there were a lot of people, every time the police attacked or the real estate company or whatever company wanted the land, their goons attacked, people just started shooting, and that evidence would land up just going on pen drives, getting uploaded, and just spiraling outwards into the media. So I thought, what if I write a story around illegal slum demolitions or minorities being targeted, just mix all of that up, and I focus on the fact that, because like I said to Kamal earlier, that I was trying to work backwards from मेरे पास क्या है? मेरे पास एक phone camera है और मेरे पास एक web camera है. So can I work backwards from this idea of the video volunteers कि एक threat to life situation है, and you are the minority and you are on the back foot, but you have the option of keeping your camera rolling. So somewhere, even therefore, that somewhere I work into the story that the violence is happening off camera, because the person doing the violence is aware that this could get recorded, because the video volunteer thought process has come into this slum or wherever it is that this violence has happened before and is going to keep happening. And also, ironically, the minute the second character, who's from a privileged class but is trying to help people who are not from the same class as hers, when she gets photographed, also उसकी फट जाती है, वो अपना laptop बंद कर देती है. She goes on the receiving end. So somewhere it was an exploration of all these ideas. So इतने सारे ideas थे कि मैं उसको limit नहीं करना चाहूंगा कि मैं क्या कहना चाहता था. मैं ये सारी चीजें कहना चाहता. Now it depends on your lens and your upbringing and your predisposition in your life, what you take away from this film.
I wanted to know about your writing process, because I've seen your films like Rahim Murge Pe Matro is one minute, and then you go from 5 minutes to Taandav. I'm specifically about short films. I was curious, like you talk about these abstract emotions that you feel inside, and then you want to structure them. And so for short film, I've seen ki aapka the structure almost like you when you said today about provoking the violence, right? You don't try to get into the violence. It's almost like a rubber band that you keep on stretching, and end may it's all come together. So I was curious to know about your way of trying to structure your thoughts in order to write for a film, because like when I practice writing, I usually end up matlab agar script bhi jati hai to a lot of times it confuses what I'm trying to express, and I try to incorporate too many layers which does not come across. And I feel that's because I'm still trying to understand the medium of filmmaking as a visual language.
You know, I've been asked this before, and I've been asked this quite often for almost 10 years now. I never know how to answer it, because unlike what Christopher Nolan believes that a filmmaker is like a magician, I feel a filmmaker and a magician are two ends of the spectrum, because a magician knows the tricks. The magician teaches himself tricks and then knows how the audience will react to that trick. A filmmaker is shooting in the dark. A filmmaker is actually an artist, is not a magician. A filmmaker doesn't really know all the tricks. What is exciting, at least for me as a filmmaker, is from film to film, I'm submitting myself to a new unknown experience. Yes, some story beats start to come to you a little more naturally the more films you make, but I try to not be too conscious of them because I'm really afraid of repeating myself. And I'm sure now anyone sits and deconstructs my work, you will find 10 things I've repeated, but I didn't do it consciously. And if I sense that I'm repeating it, I will go out of my way to not repeat it. Because otherwise, if a newer film is not a newer experience for me, then I'm not interested in making it. So I'm not very conscious or so self-aware of what my process is. From film to film, my process changes. Sometimes I operate like with Elaichi. It's not a clear answer to your question, but I'll throw a couple of anecdotes at you. Maybe they'll help you find some clarity. And most of my short films are actually extracted from feature films that never got made, because like I said, over a period of 6 to 8 years, I had some 18 films that got shelved at different stages. So I'm sitting on 30-35 ready feature screenplays, which most of which might probably not get made in my lifetime. So when I got a chance to make short films, I go back to that material, I chop and change, I pick up scenes, I thread them together. I try to not waste material. Every time I get an opportunity, I go back to material I have and I start mining the material for what can I emerge with that can lend itself to. I don't even decide कि ये 5 minute की film होगी या 11 minute की film होगी. I don't know. I'm discovering. So in Elaichi, for example, I had written a feature film. I had written a TV series actually many years earlier about a dead husband and a wife. I mean, who's actually technically a widow, but her whole frustration is that Venchud, you've not gone. So I don't know if I'm a wife or a widow, and you're not letting me grieve, but you're not letting me move on either. So a story that feels like it's about a ghost moving on actually reveals itself to be about a wife who's trying to move on. So wo TV series nahi bani, then I tried to write it as a feature. Fir wo nahi bani, then I got a chance to make a short. So I plucked a few scenes and I wrote this 5-minute short. 2 days before shoot, I go to a friend's house, this musician called Sneha Khanwalkar, and she's a bit of a nutcase, and she has all kinds of odd things in her house that inspire her to create music. And I see this dodo. And I'm like, what the fuck? Where do you get this dodo? She's like, I have a friend who sculpted this dodo out of paper mache and gave it to me. So I sat there and something happened. It triggered an idea. And I said, can I take your dodo? She said, what will you do with it? I said, I'll cast it in a film. She said, okay, he's just sitting here. So take the dodo. So one day before shoot, I call my actors, Nimrit and Divendu, and I tell them that there is a 4th character in the film and it's a dodo. Nimrit almost staged a walkout from the film. She's like, now I don't know what the fuck you're trying to make. So don't waste 2 days of my time. Because I just did Lunchbox. My career's about to take off. I don't want to be part of your whimsical artistic exploration. And I'm like, trust me, I don't know why, but I think this is going to work. And I brought the dodo to shoot and we started riffing off the dodo, and Divendu is the one who actually caught it. He created a sur. He just said, I told him that, he said, mera logic kya hai? I said, well, character logic ye hai ki you've died and you've hit this twilight zone where you met this dodo who's been in the twilight zone for 1300 years because dodos went extinct. And now the dodo doesn't know where it's supposed to go, if it can even come back in a reincarnation because dodos are extinct. So you met this dodo, you all don't know what to say to each other, but there is a recognition of the fact that you're both in the twilight zone and you both want answers. So now you're hanging out together. And wo sur pakad liya usne, then my camera work actually changed to incorporate this slightly now bizarre, fantastical tone of the dodo. And the film that emerged was not the film that I wrote till 2 days before shoot. So do I know my process? No. I just know that I'm responding and constantly trying to explore and hope, not hope. I'm also, I'm underplaying this. If you ask Kamal, he was on my shoot on Joram. I'm constantly with my team. I'm constantly questioning. Is this working? Is this working? Do we do this? Do we change this? Is this line working? Should we drop this line? So there's a constant exploration. It's not like ye decide kiya humne or script to screen ye hoga. I have no idea. That film changes radically even on edit. So it's a constant, search, and that is exhausting and frightening, but it's also very satisfying. If that's not there, then the process is not exciting.
Your use of camera, right? I've seen you like to play with the quality of image a lot in your films. Like I've seen Ajji maybe aapne phone recording ka you've used that as a device. Even in Agli Baar maybe aapne camera ko use kiya hai. And Taandav maybe there's a recording that's being. So I was wondering, how do you what's your own relationship to the idea of cameras being such a easy device to record, and how do you feel that adds a layer for you to express much more about the subject of the film?
Again, that's something best. For me, it's best left to the viewer to deconstruct and assimilate for themselves. I shot Ilaichi. Ilaichi doesn't have a phone camera. It was shot on an Epic, and I really regretted it. I'm like, मेरे पास phone camera free में था. मैंने ये पैसे खर्च क्यों किए? So when I wrote Agli Baar, I wrote it because I had no money. But the minute I wrote a story that precludes and sort of works into its DNA, that phone device, that phone camera device, I realized that here's a voice that nobody's explored. And I started getting excited about that voice because I didn't have a phone camera in my life. And I got a smartphone only 3 years ago in 2019, just before the pandemic. So I didn't have a relationship with the phone camera. I don't like shooting my daily lives. I'm not on Instagram, but I have 0 posts. So I don't do that myself. It's not a practice. So from a distance, it just feels exciting that here's a device that doesn't require any investment and is started to become so intrinsic to people's lives that you look at a sunset now, most people, not me, and the first thing you do is that you see it through your phone camera. You don't see it through your human camera anymore. It's become so intrinsic to your daily life. So because I don't do it, I'm very excited by the prospects that throws up. So it works its way into my stories. I don't decide it as a device. It's in my stories. People are shooting each other in my stories. So when I arrived at Taandav, that dance for a 50-year-old man was a little exhausting. And we didn't have the resources for me to do 6 takes because I wanted to shoot it through multiple perspectives. And this was way before I even arrived at shoot. It was during pre-production. So I said, okay, I need a multi-cam setup. And all my producers can afford to give me is one Alexa Mini for 1 day. And the rest of the film is shot on a Canon 5D and one other Canon 60D or something. I said, how do I get a multiple camera setup? So I wrote into the script 4 people who fish out their phones the minute he starts dancing. And I got a 5 camera setup. And that entire dance is 1 take. So I work it into the story.
There was a cameo of you in Taandav. I think you were dancing your heart out.
There is a story behind that as well.
Please without.
I didn't want to do a cameo. But most of the Ganpati celebration, I might sound arrogant here, but even when I finished the film and I showed it to my crew, tell me which shot is a stage shot and which shot is a real shot, and I'll change my name. And almost nobody is able to tell कि कहाँ पे वो stage shot आया Ganpati celebrations का और कहाँ पे वो real world के shots है. So a lot of the mask shots are equal number real world shots and equal number stage shots. So I first shot in the real crowds, but I lensed and framed in a way where I knew that if I go any wider, I cannot replicate it. So I lensed it in a certain way where I knew that I bring 70 junior artists into a closed space. I can easily exactly replicate what I've shot in the real world. So I approached that real world shoot almost with this method. Not कि अभी documentary की तरह सब कुछ shoot करो, बाद में देख लेंगे. I'm like, नहीं, इतना ही दायरा रखना क्योंकि मैं इतना ही recreate कर पाऊंगा. ऐसा हो जाएगा, मुझे बहुत सारे resources चाहिए होंगे जो मेरे पास है नहीं. So we went to, we earmarked certain mandalis in Parel and South Bombay that have the big Visarjans. So when they actually And this is 2000, I'm talking about 2014-15, जब इतना ये sound पे ban नहीं था और loudspeakers could keep playing till 2-3 a.m. and the beaches didn't get so cleaned up by 4 a.m. that you could not go and shoot. So this was in the messy time before things got very orderly. And I had told certain mandalis कि मैं और मेरे 2 ADs कैमरा लेकर पहुंच जाएंगे और जब आप पागल हो जाओगे हमको सिर्फ शूट करना है. तो उन्होंने बोला ठीक है, फर्क नहीं पड़ता हमको. बट ये वो गारंटी नहीं दे पाए कि ये 5 बजे शुरू होगा कि 6 बजे शुरू होगा कि 8 बजे शुरू होगा कि 10 बजे शुरू होगा, क्योंकि it depends on their mood. When they get really drunk and they get really into the vibe, maybe they'll start dancing, maybe they won't. तो मेरे पास इतना वक्त था नहीं क्योंकि मुझे 8-10 मंडलियां कवर करनी थी. तो I reached one particular mandali at 6 and I had kept my team, different people at different mandalis, giving sort of hopefully they'll start on time and we'll do this in this order, because we have a 3-hour window and then the Ganpati gets Visarjan and then you don't have anything to shoot. So I had a 3-hour window to cover all of these mandalis. So I reached the first mandali and they told me that 6 o'clock the dance will begin. The DJ will come, the van will come, dance will begin. 6 बज गया, DJ आ गया, गाना शुरू हो गया, किसी को नाचने का मूड ही नहीं हो रहा है. 6:30 बज गए, 7 बज गए, 7:15 बज गए, 7:30 बज गए, nobody's dancing. People are drinking, eating, they're like, हाँ होगा जब होगा. I'm like, यार, I can't keep waiting, I need people to dance. So I said, fuck it, I'm going to dance. So I went nuts and I started dancing because I got so fried because the pressure was mounting. I started dancing, some kids came, some adults came, and I started shooting. So that shot is me trying to inspire people to dance. So basically मेरा तांडव हो गया वहाँ पे. मैं इतना pressure में आ गया that I went crazy. And I was the only guy dancing there for almost 10 minutes.
I watched your films and the thing that struck me was I am so far from everything else that is happening in my own country. And the fact that it does not bother me every day. And when it should, and as the youth of today, I should do something about it, really made me think about it. And then I got your book and I read it with all the 5 shorts that we watched today, with all the almost all the stories in Forgetting, in Ajji, in Happy, in I think
you saw Happy as well.
Yeah, I did. So it's been crazy. The past 2 weeks have been crazy. But yeah, so in all of these, I think there are certain recurring themes. There's the motivation of death, subjugation, dark space, intimacy between characters, point of view, gaze as in per se, male gaze, female gaze, any kind of gaze, liberation, helplessness, introspection, self-criticality. And like you mentioned, there are recurring motives. There is a color palette. And I say this with regards to the book reading as well, because even while I'm reading it, I can see it. Like the imagery is so clear that even if it is not done in a visual format, I can see how the color palette will look, because I've been doing theater and I've been acting and directing for some time now. And how do you just, approach the same theme or the same concept with a newfound vigor or the need? Like, where does the exploration start and where does it end? When I say that I watched Happy and I had watched Ajji, so it's like a story inside a story, that it's mentioned as well that the rape scene, which actually it's not shown in the film, but then somebody sees that and somebody in the sense a person who has been a party to it uses it elsewhere. So it's like a story inside a story, and both are in a way it's not consensual sex per se. So how do you keep coming back to that, and how do you find a way to explore it differently?
I don't know if I am successful, because the same thing that probably worked for you, I'm assuming, doesn't work for a lot of people that I am. And this was like Happy, Ajji, all of those explorations were in the same period of time. Like now, I don't know if I can explore those same things, those same ideas and motives and gender politics in that way. I don't know if I can do it anymore, because now I am looking back, I see the limitations of my lens in an Ajji, because through the conversations with audiences, and a lot of women lawyers who saw Ajji, some of them have hauled me up for a lot of things that they thought that I didn't get right, wasn't sensitive enough. So now I'd go so far as to say that in 2023, if someone sort of does a Men in Black on me and I forget that I made Ajji, and if I watch Ajji, I'll reject the film. I'll be like, सोच रहे हो कि तुम कुछ सही कर रहे हो, but तुमने गलत किया. So I don't know. That's why I keep using the words work in progress. So then I was obsessing with trying to figure out that gaze and trying to figure out where I place myself vis-a-vis that sociological wrong. But now I would explore it or arrive at it in a very different way than I did back then, so that it won't even feel like I'm exploring the same things. Like, for example, the film Cheepatakadumpa. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I'm yet to see it. I saw Cycle as well. Sorry.
So Cycle, again, like I wrote it in 2014. So it has the same preoccupations at a very core level that Ajji and Happy do. But Cheepatakadumpa also is exploring patriarchy and sort of emancipation of a woman. And I'm trying to place my male gaze and see that can I break it in a newer way. But the exploration has nothing in common with an Ajji Happy cycle. So I'm trying to go into newer territories. So I don't know really how to clearly answer that question, because I want to be a work in progress. So I sort of try and, I won't use the word reject, it's a very harsh word, but I try and leave behind something once I'm shown the flaws in it. So I try to make everything that I do, every film I make or a book I write or a story I write as a conversation starter. So if it starts a conversation and I can get perspectives that I don't have in my DNA, and if I can build on those perspectives, then I quickly try and leave behind what I had made. Otherwise, I can't take that new perspective and run with it.
Like you mentioned that you wrote, you still write a lot, and like most of your films are written by you. Since I've been translating for some time now, and because I'm a student of literature, I have written some stuff. So how do you, when you're writing and then you're very sure that someone who is going to read it is going to understand the metaphorical implication or the symbolism, because it's just there. Like when you mention something, of course it's the subjectivity part that everyone perceives stuff differently. But when you go through a lot of literature, I think you have that way of imagining things in a certain way, and that is what is precisely needed. But with films, when I say that I saw Cycle, there are a lot of things that come, like with the subtitling part as well, and the translation per se from the visual medium to the perceiver's end, that may get lost, but which have been very cleverly incorporated. I use the word clever because I think many people do understand the implication of those who do watch these kind of films. But then how, like, of course, you cannot be sure that they will have an impact, but then what kind of process do you try to make it as visible or as specific as possible to make a certain metaphor reach through the visual medium?
This is such an epic question. We could discuss this for a day and it won't be enough. I'll oversimplify it for myself, otherwise I will not be able to attempt a response to this. I write prose, and when I write film, very early on, when I was dabbling in both, I tried very hard to understand at a very, very basic, very primal level, if I may use the word, what do I do differently when I'm writing a film and when I'm writing prose. I realized that with prose, you can, and I'll state the obvious, but then I'll build from that. You can work with the internals. You can go into first person perspective or second person or third person, and it can almost go stream of consciousness. And you can write about what that person is feeling, and you don't need to worry about it not reaching your reader. But with film, you have to externalize everything. If you have to internalize, like, for example, there's this book called The White Tiger, which got made into a film, The White Tiger. It's just my perspective. I believe the biggest failing of that film is that it took the first person voiceover literally, because the book is written in first person and the film has a goddamn voiceover right through the film. But I believe a good film takes the internal and externalizes, because a film you can externalize in so many mediums. You can externalize in sound, music, color, light, performance, choice of color palette, costume, prop. There are n number of things that you can externalize through. So that symbolism, that metaphor does not only need to take the form of an image. There are the multiple levels you can externalize in, but with word, with text, you don't really need to externalize. Text itself allows you the deepest sort of internalization, because you're talking to your viewer of that, the reader of that page. So I shift my approach when I'm going from prose to film or film to prose. Now, where I was going with this was what you said about cycle. I write my own subtitles. And again, I pushed to understand very early on, also quoting here what Sankalp said about that filmmaker Alisha Tejpal, that different audiences, maybe 4 different people inhabiting the same family in the same house, would consume a film very differently. How you use then the subtitles or the many things that the film allows to shift the cultural context of what you're saying. So say, for example, cycle is so local, English in the subtitles, I cannot even dream of translating that intensely local nuance of what's being said to an English speaking or English reading audience that does not know what this culture is like. They are viewing it from the outside. So I make cultural adaptations. So I don't translate, I adapt culturally. So I don't stay beholden to what is being said in the frame when I subtitle, so that it can transcend the cultural context of what is in that frame. Therefore, working backwards, when I'm making a film like Cycle or Joram about that indigenous person, I fictionalize the tribe. So like when you, in Cycle, I'm asked often that what is that tribe? I'm like, it doesn't exist. I've taken a little bit from the Paraja, a little bit from the Dongriya Kond, a little bit from here, a little bit from there. And I've created a fictional tribe because the point I'm trying to make is not a documentary-ish point. I'm trying to make a sociological, emotional, dramatic point. So I'm already removing myself from the cultural truth of the person, that person in the real world who I'm representing in the film. I'm already fictionalizing it so that when I go into subtitles, I'm going one step more. I'm constantly removing myself more and more from that authenticity, so that I'm not beholden to that authenticity, because I cannot claim that authenticity because I'm not that indigenous person. And I learned this from Salman Rushdie. So if you read Midnight's Children, it's the first book in the English language ever that writes dialogue in English, but you can smell the Urdu or the Hindi that that person may have been speaking if they didn't speak in English within the paradigm of that book. So I sort of taught myself that if I write in English, if I like in Forgetting, there's a story called Baitu, about these 2 Muslim brothers. And that dialogue, I learned to write that dialogue in English, but hopefully you can smell their meaning. I learned it from Midnight's Children because Salman Rushdie was the first writer who managed to do that. Then you're departing from the authenticity, but you're trying to create a cultural experience closest enough to the subject material for someone who's not from that world. Again, it's very hard to arrive at any big truths that might work from film to film or book to book. I keep trying to find that truth for that film or that world or that book.
I wasn't prepared for the session. So when I started watching Rahim Murge Pe Mat Karo, it caught me so off guard before I could, samal paane se pehle, Agli Baar, it kind of punched me in the gut. With the exact conversation that you were having about feeling privileged and also belonging to a certain place in society, where even what Sankalp was saying. So I feel the one adjective that comes to my mind is profound, is what I feel about your cinema. And also with the sound effect as well, it's something that I feel certain people who make movies get it kind of wrong. But the first time when I heard that knock, it shook me. It caught me off guard. It was very profound. It was like, I'm still in admiration, and I think I'll still want to watch them a couple of times more, your movies. But yeah, it was a really great experience.
And if I can just say something about sound, I mean, my biggest joy is when someone in an audience starts talking about the sound of my films. What I tell a lot of film school students also, when they keep, like, of all the filmmakers in this country, I mean, most of my HODs and my longtime collaborators are film school students who are graduates from film schools. So I have a lot of regard for film schools, although I'm not from one. But the most amount of bitching about resources happens in film schools. Like, I went to SRFTI to give a masterclass about 3 years back. And that was a time when they'd just come out of a strike. The students had gone on strike or something. And they were complaining that they only got 10 lakhs to make a diploma film. So I said, how long is your diploma film? They said 22 minutes. And so I said, then you need how much money? They said, कम से कम 15 लाख तो मिलना चाहिए. 15 लाख क्या होता है? I said, I make my films in 50,000 rupees. So you need to stop complaining about the lack of resources and start working towards, like I told you, Kamal, that you work with what you have. So I work my sound design into my script because sound is free. Image costs. And sound, at least I believe, and a lot of great filmmakers have corroborated what I'm going to say, that sound is most of the emotional content of what you see. If you watch a film with the sound off, the most moving film will not move you. But if you listen to a film with your eyes shut, without even knowing what's happening on screen, the film can make you cry. Sound does the emotional job. The image is actually a supporting context. And most people are sort of blindsided by film being an image medium. And when you talk about films, you talk about that image that you remember, that signature frame from that film. Nobody talks about the sound, but it is actually the sound that moved you. And you remember your emotional experience of the film because of the sound, not because of the image. The image merely provided the context for the sound to do what it had to do to you. And sound is free. It's a fucking miracle that you have sound at your disposal and no one's working it into the script. They are constantly working on image. And they're like, the sound will happen as it does. You know, the sound will follow the image. But I'm like, but if you lead with the sound, imagine what you can do because you're not beholden to budgets. So Agli Baar is all sound. It is just 3 really bad images and close-ups, which are not even dramatic. You start letting the sound lead your writing. You are actually liberating yourself from depending on other people.
मुझे देशिश पूछना था a little bit about, so we have had a little bit conversation about community building and the money involved and just money in different aspects as well. I want to understand your relationship with money. थोड़ा सा अगर उस पे बात कर सको. Not just maybe as a filmmaker, as somebody who tried to build a community, somebody who is like at a certain age of your life, how do you see money and what would you tell a 22-year-old like me about money?
It's my most complicated relationship because all my life I have not pursued money, and money has whipped my ass. So I'm 44 today and I still live in a rented apartment that I share with an actor friend. And given that I've made 4 features, the whole world, including my relatives who don't know me very well, assume that I may have bought a house and a car by now. And every studio or producer or anybody who calls me for a meeting today, the first thing they tell me ki, acha, so 3 p.m. tomorrow, so and so place, पार्किंग ना वहां पे है, आप गाड़ी वहां पे छोड़ के आ जाना. एंड आई डोंट हैव द हार्ट टू टेल देम कि मेरे पास गाड़ी नहीं है, मैं या तो बस या ऑटो में आने वाला हूं. बट द मिनट आई से दैट, आई कैन सी द स्टूडियो एग्जीक्यूटिव्स गो कि ओ हम इसका फायदा उठा सकते, क्योंकि ही डजंट अंडरस्टैंड मनी, तो इसको 1 करोड़ देने की जरूरत नहीं है, ये 5 लाख में बना लेगा. दैट इज समथिंग आई एम स्टिल स्ट्रगलिंग टू नेविगेट. आई एम हैविंग एन ऑनेस्ट मोमेंट हियर. So because I have constantly, it's a double-edged sword. I have been so afraid of and therefore so careful with money that I have tried to make my films in as little money as possible, because if my films, I know the irony in and the contradiction inherent in what I do. I make films about people who should be getting chunk of this country's resources and they're not getting it. And I'm using resources to make films. Films don't change the world. Policy making does. And if that money that is being used to make films goes into policy making, maybe the world will be a slightly better place. So I'm not blind to that delusion. When I'm doing that, then I'm constantly trying to make my films in as little as possible so that I leave the smallest carbon footprint possible. But when I'm doing that, I end up at the age of 44 not even having made enough money to live by myself on rent. So there's a constant tug of war inside me कि मैं क्या करूं? Do I demand a certain, legit fee that I have probably earned given how many dues I've paid in this industry? But then I'll have to make films of a certain budget. But I know the kind of wastage that happens at that budget. Kamal has seen on my film, Joram is the biggest film I made to date. And I tried very hard to, for example, 2 तरह का खाना लगता है बड़ी फिल्मों के set. And there are the certain worker class that eats a certain in a certain place. And then there are the HODs and the actors who eat in a certain place. I tried my level best to have just one khana. But my entire production team went up in arms saying that you don't have the kind of time to afford everybody standing in one line. So you need to set up 2 different, food setups. They said, then why can not everybody go to those 2 food setups? I think we don't know how to streamline it. Workers have to go in one place and HODs in one place for us to be able to streamline it. So वहाँ पे class आ गया, class difference आ गया, वहाँ पे wastage आ गया. So I am not able to implement that when films go beyond a certain, scale. So there's a constant tug of war inside me when it comes to money and what money can buy and how much I need to make my films. So I don't have clear answers on that. I live my ironies out in different ways. I speak a certain way, but I submit to certain processes that I would like for them to not happen the way they happen. So when you and I spoke about the abstract room vis-a-vis the community I used to run, Abobo, where entries, no matter what, I was a bloodhound about it. I said, "एक रुपया कोई charge नहीं करेगा." So therefore, the pressure is on me to ensure all the resources come for free. So my team that I put together, I cobbled together, filmmakers and actors and all kinds of artists who came together, 15 of us, to run Abobo. One by one, people started dropping out because it's hard to sustain the energy and time and resources you're giving without getting anything in return. But the energy I was able to create in those rooms when I was letting anyone and everyone walk in, because yes, I know you need that 50, 100, 150 rupees to keep your basics covered. I get that. I'm not blind to the necessity of that. But I know that money, I won't say I know, but I believe that money is a very corruptible entity. And the minute it comes, it brings a certain energy of expectation. So the people coming, when they've paid, even if they paid 5 rupees or 500 rupees, the fact that they've paid, they expect a certain treatment. And I wanted to dispense with that. So in Abobo, even the guy who used to run the canteen at Veda Factory used to come into the screenings. So it was so socialistic, that energy, that vibe, because nobody paid, nobody had expectations, everybody came to be surprised. So it was a community without class, without barriers, without boundaries, without filters. So that energy that I saw in Abobo, I have not seen in the best film festivals in the world. But what is the downside? I couldn't sustain it. 7 Abobos and I just couldn't run it anymore. Everybody started falling off. And ultimately it was just 2 or 3 of us and I couldn't sustain it because I needed resource and I was adamant that I will not reach out for money. So maybe I'll do it in the future, but those 7 Abobos that I did were probably 7 of the most joyous things I've done in my life. So it's a very conflicted relationship that I have with money.
As I mentioned, मैं सूरत में बड़ा हुआ हूँ mostly. And मैंने बस 3 साल मुंबई रहा हूँ मैं during my bachelor's. Actually 3 साल भी नहीं, 3 साल मेरा वहाँ था, but lockdown की वजह से I was only 1.5 years in Mumbai and बाकी here only. And now I travel for abstract room sessions and also for some other work I used to have earlier. So the first time I came to the Versova Aramnagar area was during the Genie Bin Chadaria session, which was right before the one that we conducted with you. बहुत stopgap solution मैंने जगह ढूंढी और मैं वर्सोवा आया, आरामनगर देखा, सुना इतना है कि मतलब सभी यहाँ पे होता है, this is the place. And because growing up in a different city which has nothing to do with cinema as such, you hear things, लोग जाते हैं झुंड में मुंबई कुछ करने के लिए, ड्रीम्स लेके स्ट्रगल करते हैं, ये करते हैं, वो करते हैं, बहुत चीजें सुनने में आती है. I was extremely overwhelmed. I'm being extremely honest and exactly like just observing. I was just observing things. It just felt very unsettling for me as an outsider and as somebody who doesn't necessarily have any direct objective or aim at the moment to get into films or filmmaking as such. तो मेरे लिए बड़ा ऐसी एक आउटसाइडर पर्सपेक्टिव हो गया कि यार यहाँ काम चल कैसे रहा होगा, like how is it working out for people. And because I'm from a business background, दिमाग चल रहा है वैसे फैमिली का कि मतलब कैसे करते कैसे लोग, गुजारा कैसे हो रहा है, क्या कैसे हो रहा है. And I also felt like even in the session that we had with the Genie Bini one and the one with you as well, the kind of people I had to interact with, the kind of people who had joined also, I felt this sense of एक detachment तो था ही, but एक sense of entitlement भी था. We are artists. I'm just sharing exactly what I experienced firsthand. Could be multiple other perspectives, but I felt like थोड़ा सा एक sense of कि we are artists, we are doing something impactful or greater than ourselves as well. So we have a certain say in the society or something like that. I don't know. I just felt very unsettled by that. What are things about Versova or the Aramnagar community that I am not aware of or I need to have a different perspective about? Because my understanding is कि सब अपना ही देख रहे हैं. And it is not really as collaborative maybe, or it is probably very alienating and very competitive and scary. पता नहीं मेरा understanding वैसा बन चुका है. What is it that I don't know?
It is really difficult, man, to walk into this place and expect to see your dreams manifest and to get what you thought you would get when you came here. And for 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, 7 years, 9 years, 11 years, 12 years, 14 years, you're not getting there. It's very difficult to not feel, and that what is calling entitled, yes, I call it entitled too, but I'd like us to not forget the other part of that entitlement, that somewhere every film artist that comes to Bombay needs to find a little bit of drive and arrogance and also a little bit of adamance and blindness to logic to keep going. Otherwise it's just not, it doesn't make sense what we do to ourselves beyond the point, because all of us beyond the point, and I know I'm sounding like I'm an authority in the matter, but I know enough people to be able to, I think, say this, that all of us have mental health issues. All of us have had psychological breakdowns. Like, I'll give you one example to tell you what kind of timelines I'm talking about. I came up with the story of Bhonsle in 2006. I wrote the script in 2010. I found a producer for the first time in 2011. It didn't get made. Then I found a producer in 2013. It didn't get made. I found Manoj Bajpayee in 2014. It didn't get made. Then we tried again in 2015. It didn't get made. Then we made Taandav. Found a producer in 2016. It got shot in 2017. It started festival in 2018. It won a national award in 2019. It released in 2000. No, it won some festival awards in 2019, released in 2020, and won a national award in 2021. That's a 17 fucking year journey. How the fuck am I supposed to motivate myself through that without being a little adamant? And that adamance starts getting seen as entitlement, as arrogance, as, you know, working in your own little isolated bubbles. We can't help it beyond the point. There is a lot of this and there's a lot of good things too, but it's not easy to want a piece of this pie that so many people want and to keep motivating yourself, knowing that you may not get it in this lifetime. When I came to Bombay in October 2002, it's been over 20 years now. I ended up, first 3 nights I lived on Goregaon station. Then I kept from a PCO calling these friends of mine from NID who had decided to move here. And they were all living in these clusters, 8 people in a room, 12 people in a room. So finally, a bunch of these guys who were staying in a colony called Nagri Nivara Parishad, which is near a slum called Santosh Nagar behind Film City in Goregaon. Film City, where all the films get made. So it was a pretty difficult place to stay because it had no water supply and all of that. And there were some 6-8 of us to a room. So I stayed there for a while. And that colony then, now it's not the same anymore. That colony then was a strugglers colony. So every night, so there were these 2 dhabas where you got a rice plate, which was rice, dal, sabzi, and 2 rotis and pickle for 10 rupees. So all of us descended on those 2 dhabas at night for the 10 rupee meal. And there were like 100, 150 strugglers. So some were cinematographers, some were musicians, some were actors, some were directors, not just actors, so a motley lot. So we all started talking. And I want to understand, यहाँ पे 150 लोग हैं जो जिनको वही चाहिए जो मुझे चाहिए और कितने हैं, what am I up against and should I even try? So we researched and I found out that 2002 figures that every day just to join the film industry, the footfalls, 12,000 people landed up in Bombay every fucking day in 2002. So I'm like, I'm up against 12,000 people every day. Should I go back? Why am I even thinking about trying? But then the other figures came that 96% actually go back after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. 4% stick it out. From those 4%, probably 90% of those 4% don't have the chops to get what they've come here to get. So you start sort of justifying this to yourself, you know, you have the chops and you will make it. You are the fish that will last that mile in the sea. But you start deluding yourself, you start motivating yourself, you start becoming adamant, you start becoming blind to logic. Then 1 film gets shelved, and 2 get shelved, 8 get shelved, 18 get shelved. Again, 8 years down the line, I'm sitting in Bombay and what the fuck am I doing? Should I go back? It's still not too late. So that's the energy that you saw in Aramnagar. There are these little bubbles. Every person is a bubble who's carrying all this history and all these insecurities, but still trying to find motivation to keep fighting on. So that's what you probably missed. So the longer you stay here, this will start revealing itself to you because you'll become one of us.
Have you seen that film, An Action Hero? So उसमें एक बहुत ही unique सा एक scene था, किसी को अगर देखिए तो याद होगा. So a film shoot is been happening and किसी का murder हो जाता है and investigation जब हो रही होती है तो एक DOP को बुलाते हैं film के investigation के लिए. तो पुलिस वाले पूछते हैं कि तुम क्या करते हो? And he had like entire वो लंबे बाल दाढ़ी वैसा वाला लुक प्रॉपर था. तो पूछते तुम क्या करते हो? तो बोलता है सर मैं DOP हूँ. बोलता क्या DOP क्या, मतलब तो हरियाणी पूरा बोलता है कि क्या DOP क्या होता है, DSP होता है, DCP होता है, DOP क्या होता है, कुछ भी बोलते रहते तुम. बकवास समझ, तुम नक्सलवादी हो, तुम क्या, तुमसे तुम्हारा समाज में रोल क्या है एज अ DOP. So that entirely very small scene, but it just मुझे दिमाग में खाली आया और सोचे कि मतलब how do you or just filmmakers see themselves in society and उनका क्या रोल है या प्लेस है एंड उनका कितना एक्चुअली बात का मतलब है नहीं है. What do you
very early on in this conversation that I don't delude myself कि मेरी फिल्में कुछ change करेंगी. My films won't change the world. Policy making will. If you really want to change the world and that's your primary objective, you should join politics because politics needs sensible, educated people. It's going further and further into a fucking shithole. What the best people are doing, pursuing the arts, I don't know. So during the pandemic, I was out there doing a lot of relief work right through the pandemic. And there were a lot of artists because Germany, the government gave out 5,000 euros blanket to every artist to survive the pandemic, saying कि हम तुम्हारा ख्याल रखें. So artists in India went up in arms saying कि हमारा ख्याल रखो, क्योंकि art तो कोई नहीं पूछ रहा. आप कह रहे हो कि yes and very justifiably so, farmer की जरूरत है, scientist की जरूरत है, plumber की जरूरत है, but artist की जरूरत नहीं है, तो कोई देख नहीं रहा हमको. But जब आप पेंडेमिक में घर पे फंसे हो, आप तो पोइट्री पढ़ रहे हो ना, आप किताब पढ़ रहे हो और फिल्म देख रहे हो. एंड देन आई सेड एक सेकंड, आई गेट दैट, आई अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट यू सेइंग, आई एम एन आर्टिस्ट टू, बट आई एम आउट देयर डूइंग रिलीफ एंड पीपल आर एक्चुअली डाइंग ऑफ हंगर, और फार्मर को अभी भी काम पे जाना पड़ेगा क्योंकि वो गेहूं आएगा नहीं खिलाने को तुमको. तो फार्मर ज्यादा जरूरी है, आर्टिस्ट उतना जरूरी है नहीं. एक सोसाइटी, शायद सोसाइटी में कीड़े लग जाएंगे, दीमक लग जाएंगे आर्टिस्ट के बिना, पर सोसाइटी कोलैप्स नहीं कर जाएगी, अडेप्ट कर जाएगी. बट फार्मर और साइंटिस्ट के बिना सोसाइटी कोलैप्स कर जाएगी. सो इट्स अ ऑनगोइंग डिबेट. I say this to myself, so I don't want to feel self-important and entitled, but somewhere I have to motivate myself too, because I want to see the world change, but I'm very aware my films or my books won't change them. But I'm hoping they'll start dialogue. I'm hoping dialogue will, if started at a certain number and at a certain time, if we hit a threshold together, maybe it will affect policy making, but maybe it won't happen in my lifetime. But I know why I make films or tell stories, because all shit aside, if I don't tell my stories, I can't sleep at night. मेरे अंदर है और वो निकला नहीं ना, मैं खुद को मार दूंगा. तो निकलना मेरे लिए जरूरी है, मैं इसीलिए करता. तो अब वो निकलता है, और some people think कि you are trying to change society. I said no, that's your perception of it. That was not my primary objective, because if it was, I would be in politics and I would be a policy maker. I would be in the administrative services. I would be in an NGO. They are really changing the world. Because when I was doing relief work throughout the pandemic, people sat and wrote a book कि जो किताब में नहीं लिख पाया पूरी life में, मैं pandemic में लिख लिया. In my pandemic months, I did zero art. I was out there distributing gehu and chawal because that was saving lives.
Please ask him. A person like me who's never been to a film school and trying to learn and understand cinema through cinema, how does one make the most of it?
I've never been to film school. I'm an economics student. And the one thing, I mean, I don't have any things I would prescribe. Everybody should go on their own journeys, because cinema, any art, is something that you learn by doing and exploring on your own. But there's one thing that really helped me. It's a very simple exercise, and a lot of film scholars before me have said it too. Choose your favorite films and watch them 3 times. Once, watch them properly. Second time, watch them with the sound off, to understand the visual choices that the filmmaker made. And the third time, listen to it with the image off, to understand the sound choices that the filmmaker made. If you just do this, the filmmaking reveals itself to you like no book or no film scholar and no film school can. Just you will know why Kubrick did what he did, why Hitchcock did what he did, why anybody did what they did.
I had actually मेरे draft में मेरे पास में एक छोटा सा article लिखा है about audacity in filmmaking, and मेरा limited exposure में जो मैंने देखा है, मुझे क्या audacious लगता है. Like for me, Rajamouli and the idea of making Makhi is extremely audacious. Let's say Stanley Kubrick's films are extremely audacious. They have that scale as well. But very recently, I had added your name to it as well, and I'm genuinely saying it without just because you are here or just because I want to say something. आपके लिए audacity क्या है filmmaking में? कौन से आपको filmmakers बहुत audacious लगते हैं?
I mostly respond to a film, not a filmmaker, but a film that, and I'll name some of my favorite films then to explain my point. I respond to films that emotionally surprise me. Like, even if, I mean, there are just some limited basic emotions that a human being feels. But if it, like, sorrow comes to you in a way where it never came to you before, or laughter comes to you in a way that never came to you before, that is what I find most surprising and inspiring and maybe audacious in a filmmaker. Because a lot of filmmakers are quite content doing what has been done before. So if I deconstruct what I just said, it's about filmmakers who are trying things they've never done before. And when you mention Kubrick, although I'm not a big fan of all his work, there are some films that surprised the fuck out of me. Like, nobody had done that before. How did you imagine that this would work? So that I see as audacious. So Kubrick said something that, again, I say to a lot of people who work with me and in film schools, that he said the primary responsibility of filmmaker is to create a sound and an image that has not been created before. If you're not doing that with your cinema, don't make cinema. You are then just doing a job. Then just go work in a bank. You're doing what's been done before. Then you're doing a job. You're showing up every day. You're taking a salary, which the Hollywood studio system was. A director and a DOP and an art director were hired by a studio for 5 years. They got a salary, and whatever film got greenlit that month, they worked on that. So he says that if you're not creating a sound or an image that you've not been created before, you're not a filmmaker. That's your primary responsibility. So his audacity that you see is because he believes in that. So most filmmakers who I think live by that thought, they may not have expressed it like him, are the ones you might be finding audacious. So I find Ritik Ghatak audacious. I find Kubrick audacious. I find Terrence Malick in his earlier films audacious. Then he's repeating his own sounds and images. And after Tree of Life, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, man? You're just making the same film over and over again. You're not surprising me anymore. But until Tree of Life, you surprised the fuck out of me. You made me feel in Thin Red Line, which is one of my all-time favorite films. You made me feel the horrors of war, which everybody else was doing, from Steven Spielberg to the older masters to Full Metal Jacket to Kubrick. But the way he did in Thin Red Line, I'm like, how did you make me feel this in this way? By being so metaphysical. I'm still feeling horrified by war, but you crept under my soul. You didn't just shock me or horrify me or frighten me or make an anthropological comment. You went philosophical on me and you made me feel horrified by war. So filmmakers who do things that have not been done before in the medium, I find audacious.
So since all these performances were very, very intense, I would like to, dig deeper into, थोड़ा सा explore करना चाहूँगा कि what's your process, on working with actors on set?
On set तो बहुत कम काम होता है. मैं set के पहले बहुत काम करता हूँ. There's every film, including the smallest film like Agli Baar, मेरे घर पे 6 दिन या 5 दिन discussions, workshops, tech rehearsals, repeated tech rehearsals, figuring out the cues and the beats and rewriting the script. मैं shoot पे, set पे मैं सिर्फ छापता हूँ. वहाँ पे बहुत ज़्यादा improvisations होती हैं, but I don't see improvisations as we don't have a script, let's improvise. I don't see that as improvisation. I see that as chutiapa. You're wasting time and money because the film, the minute you've hit a set, the clock is ticking. Even the smallest film, money is being spent. क्योंकि लोगों को खिलाना पड़ेगा और पानी पिलाना पड़ेगा, उस सब पे पैसे खर्च होते हैं. तो when I reach set, the improvisation is only from the everybody is on the same page. वहां से क्या improvise कर सकते? वहां पे we find the next level of magic. The rest happens in lots of intense workshopping and rehearsing at a prep stage. So basically, like I even spoke about sound, I have trained myself because I've made a lot of my films with no money after seeing a lot of my films get shared. So I trained myself to create a process where the stages and the departments of the film where the least money is being spent, I try to do the most work in those places. जहाँ पे ज्यादा पैसे खर्च होने वाले हैं, वहाँ पे जितना कम टाइम बिताओ उतना फिल्म के लिए अच्छा है. तो शूट पे सबसे ज्यादा पैसे खर्च होते हैं, मैं शूट पे बहुत कम टाइम बिताता. सुषमा ताई will tell you, in Ajji we had 10 days, exhaustive 16-hour days, where in one dance rehearsal space, we recreated the dimensions of the house and the construction site. And we repeatedly played out the scenes, explored the beats, explored the emotions, brought in the action director and the DOP. Everything, all the blocking, everything was done in that dance rehearsal room because that cost us almost nothing. And the entire film was shot in 18 days. If I had not done those 10 days, the film would have taken 30 days to shoot. But every day costs.
Since, as an artist, like everybody of us, is evolving every day and wants to improve every day. So, like, just from your perspective, हम क्या कर सकते हैं, like, just to, again, evolve yourself more and more, dig deeper into characters more and more?
I don't know, man. मैं कुछ भी बोलूँगा इतना, it'll sound like a nugget of wisdom, but it might not work for you what worked for me. ये मुझे थोड़ा dangerous लगता है जब आपको जिसका काम पसंद आए, आप उसका प्रोसेस समझने की कोशिश करते हो. ये मेरे साथ भी हुआ है, इसलिए मैं ऐसे ब्रॉड तरीके से कह रहा हूँ. Then you sort of subconsciously also, even if not consciously, you start thinking कि अगर मैंने कुछ ऐसी चीजें आजमाई, मैं शायद अपनी ऑब्जेक्टिव्स हासिल कर पाऊंगा. बट जरूरी नहीं है कि मेरे पैरामीटर्स और एक्सपीरियंसेस आपके लिए काम करें. तो मैं ये चीज तो मैं कहना ही नहीं चाहूंगा. आपको अपना रास्ता ढूंढना पड़ेगा. अगर आप नॉट वेरी इंस्पायर्ड फील कर रहे हो, फिर आपको 10 चीजें एक्सप्लोर करनी पड़ेंगी. उन 10 में से एक चीज शायद आपको इंस्पायर करे. बट मैं आपको कह दूं कि मुझे इस चीज ने इंस्पायर करी, बिल्कुल गारंटी नहीं है कि वो आपको इंस्पायर करेगी. तो ये तो ना मुझसे ना मुझ जैसे किसी से ये सवाल पूछो और सीरियसली भी मत लो. But that artistic journey is to look for what things will inspire you. Like I get asked this often, ki what films inspired you? I'm like, I'm not inspired by films only. I don't watch too many films. And that is shocking for most people because it's you take it for granted कि filmmaker तो film से inspire तो होता ही होगा. But मुझे बहुत सारी चीजें करनी थी और मुझे वो सारी चीजें करने को मिली सिनेमा में. तो मैं सिनेमा में आया. मुझे फिल्म देखकर मैं इंस्पायर नहीं होता हूँ क्योंकि मेरा दिमाग का दही हो जाता है. वो इतना लाउड, इतना साउंड, इतना इमेज, it's so overbearing for me. I don't watch a film in one flow. Ever. I don't watch films in halls. I watch them on my device. so I can watch a film over 4 days. और मुझे इतना धिक्कारते हैं मेरे फेलो फिल्म मेकर्स, तुम ऑडियंस बनकर नहीं देख पाते, फिर तुम अपने आप को भूल कर नहीं रहे। ऐसे मैं नहीं भूलना खुद को, मुझे मजा आता है 4 दिन लगाकर देखना। जैसे मैं किताब पढ़ता हूँ वैसे मैं फिल्म देखता हूँ, क्योंकि मुझे मजा आता है उसको डिकंस्ट्रक्ट करना देखते हुए, वो मेरा प्रोसेस है। बट दिस मे नॉट अप्लाई टू एवरीबडी एल्स। सो मेनी फिल्म मेकर्स go crazy with inspiration when they're sitting in a dark hall and a film starts playing on that big screen. They're like, इसके लिए हम जीते हैं। ऐसे मुझे लगता है कि यार वो थिएटर बनाई क्यों? इतना रियल एस्टेट आपने यूज किया वो गिन चुन के वो 250 प्रिविलेज लोगों के लिए, जहां पे शायद आप स्लम रिहैब की इतनी बड़ी इमारत खड़ी कर सकते थे, 2000 लोग रिहेबिलिटेट हो सकते थे वहां पे। तो मुझे तो थिएटर लुक्स लाइक अ सोशियोलॉजिकल वेस्ट, वो मेरा पर्सपेक्टिव है। तो मैं फिल्म्स को तो थिएटर्स में धिक्कारता हूँ। मुझे लगता है कि आप रिसोर्सेज वेस्ट कर रहे हो that can be used for the betterment of society.